Hi everyone, welcome back to Winging It. We're in week 41 and this week we're going to be making the second half in the flower garland block that we started last week. If you're new here, we're making a quilt on a garden theme. We make roughly one block a week and I will put the playlist at the top so that you can go back and watch any video in this series if you want to. So last week we made this half on our blue fabric and I'll just talk you through what I've done with my background here. So I've cut myself a piece of my yellow floral that appears elsewhere on the quilt. This is cut to 20 by 20 centimetres. I've marked a 1 centimetre seam allowance down the left hand side and I've hand back stitched those two together. So I just folded the two together like a book and stitched along the seam allowance, and then I've opened it out and pressed the seams to the blue side because it's the stronger colour and I don't want the fabric showing through on the yellow side. I'll just take you round what else I've got on my table. So I've got some scraps of fabric that I've used for other flower garlands. I've got my blue floral, which I may not use, my blue stripe, my red spot, then my pink, yellow and pale blue plain fabrics, and I've got some greens which I may or may not use as well. I've also got my heat and seal. I've been enjoying using this over the last few videos. It's a bit like Bondaweb. If you prefer Bondaweb, carry on using it. I've found that the glue bond is a little bit stronger with heat and seal, but you use whichever you prefer. I've got some marking tools and my embroidery and paper scissors, and then I've got my threads that I've been using. These are all Anchor brand. I've got my white, which is 001, my blue, which is 130, my pink, which is 025, my light green, which is 255, my mid green, which is 258, yellow, which is 298, and my red, which is 046. So if you prefer DMC, feel free to swap in the equivalent colours or use colours that match your colour scheme. Before I start, there is a template for this week. This goes hand in hand with last week's template. You can find this at our website. I'll put the address at the bottom of the screen, but I'll put a link in the description below as well. This costs £1 to download. It's just a nominal charge to help cover the cost of making these videos and just to help support this channel. Please don't feel obliged. If you are happy to freehand this, just go for it. But if you are new to this process and want a bit of a guide, all the measurements and placements are done for you, so that is available if you want it. This first part of the process we did last week. I'm going to Bondaweb some of our flowers onto the background. I'm going to start by transferring the pattern, and I'll show you this bit because there are some tricks about getting the join right that might be useful. So I've brought in my light box and I'm lining up my fabric with the outer square on my template, and I'm paying particular attention to the right hand side. That's where I need to focus my alignment there. I'm using a light box just for filming, but I've been sewing all my life and only got one of these in the last couple of years, so you can hold it up to a window. As long as there's light behind your pattern, you should be able to see through. It is a little bit more tricky on patterned fabric, but I can see just about well enough. So I'm going to start with my aqua pen. I'm using this so that I don't erase the lines every time I attach a piece of applique, and I'm just sketching over the strings first of all, just following on from the lines that we drew in last week, and then I'm just going to mark in the tips of the petals on the flowers. Last week I put in the centres as well. You really don't need to. I didn't use them at all because they get covered up. These are just placement markers so that we know where our flowers should go without any hassle. Now at the centre we put in half of these flowers last week. The extra bit of the flower is on the template from last week, And so I'm just going to go over the lines at the centre there just to demonstrate. What I need to make sure of is that I've lined up that right hand side, because that will make sure that my seam down the centre sits at exactly the right point. And if I continue and sketch over the centres of the flowers at the middle, what you should find is that those lines match up exactly with the parts of the centres that we drew in last week. Now you can't see my flower tips very well because of the light box. I can't see them very well. So I will turn off my light box, but if I just find those markers and go over them, they have faded a little bit over the week. You should find that when you turn off your light box, those flower tips are in exactly the right positions, and that all comes from lining up with the right hand side. So now I've got precise markers for the flowers that are going to go over that seam at the centre. So that's how that works. So I'm not going to show you the bonder web process again, that was outlined really thoroughly last week. I will link that video at the top of the screen so that you can find it easily. I'm just going to go off camera and attach my bonder web shapes, and then we can come back and add our stitching and have a little bit of a chat. I thought I'd just show you this as well because I thought it might be helpful to know how to handle these broken flowers at the centre. You can, if you want to, cut your template down the inner line on the left hand side and tape this part of the template to the inner line on the right hand side of last week's template. But if you just want to buy one template, or you don't want to faff about with that, there is a way of doing it with even these partial flowers. So I'm going to start with a piece of heat and seal, and I'm just going to trace through what I can see of the flower, and that leaves some petals missing. So all I do then is rotate the parts of the flower that I've already sketched, and I'm going to rotate them round one petal to the left so that the lines that I've already drawn match up with the partial lines at the centre. And then I am just going to sketch in the remaining petals, and because these flowers are symmetrical, it's just going to work. So in my usual style, I'm going to mark that as number 1 on my pattern and on my tracing. So let me show that again. It's easier if you line up your flower with the right hand side of your piece of heat and seal. So again, I'm tracing through those partial flowers onto the paper side of my heat and seal. So there's 3 petals, or 2.5 petals on this one, and this one there are more missing sections, so I'm just tracing through what I've got. Like that, and then I'm going to rotate it just one petal round and match up the 2 petals at the top, so this one and this one, and then I can put in the next petal, and then I rotate it again and again match up this one here and this one, and then I can put in my next petal, and then I rotate it once more and put in that final petal at the bottom, and that will give me a complete flower. So that's how to do it if you don't want to cut your template and tape it and all of that kind of thing. So that will give you your complete flower, and I'm going to label it again. So this one's number 5, and I'm going to carry on and do the rest in the normal way. So I've bonder webbed all my flower pieces on, and I've put in some of the running stitch. So you'll see in last week's video I've got a colour scheme that I always use on my flower garlands, and I've put in most of the colours. Wherever I've got pink fabric, I'm using red thread. So I've got 2 strands of red here, and with all of these shapes I'm going to running stitch around the outside. You can see on my red and yellow flower there, I've got yellow thread wherever I've got red fabric, and I've running stitched around the outside of the petals, and wherever I use yellow fabric I've got 2 strands of blue thread, and it's just a really simple running stitch all the way around, just so that you've got the other colours. Where I've got pale blue I've used white thread, and wherever I've got that blue stripe I've used pink. So always 2 strands of thread for this, and I'm working just inside the shape and working my running stitch so that the stitches themselves are longer than the spaces between them. And because I've got multiple layers here, I've got 3 layers of fabric on the flower centres and 2 layers of heat and seal, it is quite tough to get my needle through, so you can see I'm doing it in 2 motions here rather than hooking the fabric. It's just easier if your needle is going vertically. So that's what I'm going to do there. I'm going to running stitch around that flower centre and then around the petals of the pink flower that you can see just at the top there. So I will chip in and tell you what stitches I'm using and things like that, but I thought I would just introduce myself. So if you are new here, my name's Rebecca. I've been sewing for many years, and last year I thought I would venture out and do a weekly stitch along on YouTube, calling it Winging It, because I do mostly make these panels up pretty much as I'm going along. So I sketch a rough design out, and then the colours and the stitches are not planned, so I'm working it out as I'm filming, and sometimes I love it, sometimes I wish I'd done it slightly differently, but I just want to encourage as many people as possible to try embroidery, get playing around with fabrics and just enjoying the process. It's quite mindful. Obviously I've got the added the added factor of trying to film it as well and making sure that everything's in shot and that I explain it as clearly as possible. But I just want to encourage you to get stitching really. It's a hobby that is so restful. It's so tactile. I just love having fabric in my hand. You won't see me using a frame very much because I just love handling the fabric and holding it while I'm stitching. And it's, I think because it's so rhythmic, you're repeating the same process over and over again when you're stitching. It's just got that really mindful, restful quality, and if you're not filming you can just lose yourself in the stitching. And I often find that when I'm sewing I don't really think about very much else, and I just am able to be present in the moment, enjoying the rhythmic quality of stitching, and it just is so great for my mental health. I absolutely love it and I can't recommend this hobby enough. My focus tends to be on beginners, so everything I do, including the kits that we sell in our shop on our website, are all suitable for beginners. You can never have stitched before, and I hope that the designs that I come up with are accessible for you. Occasionally I will do something slightly more advanced, and some of the blocks are trickier than others, but this one is just a great one for beginners. If you've never done a plique before, or if you've never embroidered before, this one is really straightforward. So the most difficult thing on this block is getting your needle through the layers of fabric at the flower centres. That's about as hard as it gets. So my aim in life is to get as many people introduced to working with fabrics and stitching as I possibly can, and it absolutely makes my day when I get comments saying, oh, I've just found your channel, never stitched before, but I think I'm going to give this a go. It looks really straightforward. I just think, yes, that's what I'm here for. So hopefully I don't leave behind advanced stitchers. I'm capable of doing much more technical things than this, but that's not really my aim. This is all about mindful stitching, where we're not worrying about the finish too much. It's all about the creative process. I'll just chip in here with what I'm doing. So I've jumped now to putting in the garland itself that's holding these flowers together, and I'm using a chain stitch here, and I work each of these sections separately because I don't want great long trails of thread behind the flowers. So I'm just stitching in the spaces between each flower, then I'll finish my thread off on the back and then re-knot it and restart it. If you're not sure about chain stitch, I'll put my stitch tutorials playlist at the top of the screen, and there's all sorts of stitches in there. There's a really slow and straightforward guide to chain stitch in my chain stitch variations video, so there's lots of tips there to help you get a good finish. I use a quilter's knot, that's what I've just done on the back there, but you do you. So I'm just going to carry on and put the rest of those chain stitches in, and then I'm going to back stitch over that chain stitch with my pale green. I should say this is 2 strands of my mid green here that I'm using. So if you don't know, I'm not a full-time YouTuber. This is not what I do all day every day. This fits in around my day job, which is quite a demanding day job. I'm a secondary school English teacher in England, and in September I started a new job heading up an English department at a local secondary school. It's my job to make sure that the curriculum is okay and that the teachers in the department have everything they need to do their job, and I teach probably around 130 children a week, teach each of my groups every day, and so that's quite a demand in and of itself, just planning all those lessons. But English notoriously has a huge amount of marking involved because we assess everything with writing, so it is quite a demanding job, and I have to be honest, it's been tough this term. Since September we had Ofsted the other week. That was an added shock when you're new to the school. Because if you're not from the UK, Ofsted is a government inspectorate of schools, and they are in the news a lot at the moment because there's lots of question marks about the effectiveness of it and the pressure that they put on teachers and the workload that it generates. But anyway, they came in the other week. I can't talk about it much beyond that because the report hasn't been published yet. So because I head up the department, I was the one that had to sit with Ofsted inspectors and explain why we have the curriculum that we do and why we do the things that we do in the department. So had to go and observe lessons with them, and we only get a day's notice that they're coming. So I was told, I was on duty at lunchtime on the Monday, and one of the senior leadership team at school came to see me and said that Ofsted were coming the next day. So that led to 3 very, very long and difficult days, and then to add insult to injury, the day after Ofsted had been, we had our open evening for prospective parents, so we then had to put on a show to attract people to the school. So it has been really tough over the last couple of months, just being able to manage my job and get these videos filmed. It's one of the reasons why I took a break the other week, because I had to make some choices about whether I was just going to plough on or just say, do you know, I've had enough. And I'm not very good at it, but I am trying really hard to do more to look after myself and protect my physical and mental health while I'm working and making these videos. And I love making these videos, and it was quite a tough decision for me to not make one week, but something had to give, so that's why there wasn't a video the other week. I promise I'll try and catch up. So yeah, it's been an extremely busy half term. because I'm learning a new job and trying to work out how to make videos at the same time. I don't want to sound like I don't like it, because I am really enjoying being there. It's one of the friendliest and warmest staff teams that I've ever worked on. I love my job. I love being a teacher. I love working with young people, but I can't pretend that it's not really difficult. So it's just sort of trying to balance things so that I'm not grinding myself into dust. So let me just jump in and explain what I'm doing here. So in between the petals, I'm putting a long stemmed detached chain stitch. So you just bring your needle up, take it back down in the same place, making a little loop out of your thread, and then you bring your needle back up through the fabric and through the loop, so that you catch that loop on the working thread, and then I'm just taking a straight stitch down to the flower centre just to hold the loop in place, and I just put one of those in between each petal on the flower. So that's work. There's also Featherstitch House behind the scenes as well. So Featherstitch House began during lockdown. I had to shield during lockdown, and it meant that I had quite a lot of time on my hands. So I was still teaching. I taught all the way through lockdown, and I had to shield for another 7 months in the second lockdown in the UK, and I taught remotely. So I taught from home, and my face was projected onto the classroom wall, and I had a camera set up so that I could see my class and a member of staff sitting in the room, just making sure that they were safe. And that's how I taught for 7 months, because I couldn't leave my house until I'd been vaccinated. That was quite difficult, but I did find that because I wasn't commuting, I was at home, I could have a proper lunch, which I rarely have, and I just had lots of time, particularly in that first lockdown. So one of the things that I did was open up a box of unfinished projects that had just sat there for actually years, because I'd thrown myself into my teaching job and had let all my sewing and my hobbies go to one side really. And in there was a felt alphabet that I'd started making for my daughter when she was born, where I'd thought about phonics and stitched onto felt some symbols for each of the letters of the alphabet. And I realised that my skills had improved significantly. So she was 10 in lockdown and I'd started these when she was born, so they just literally had sat there for years. And in that 10 years I'd been embroidering, my skills had improved, I got much better, and it was quite cringy to see how bad the originals were. So I set about redesigning them, and as I was making them, my husband said, this should be a kit, people should be able to make this because they are really cute, I think people would buy it. And I've never had any confidence really in my abilities or my skills. I've never really been able to say that I'm good at anything, and so I was not keen at all. But as I kept going and made the complete alphabet, I started wondering actually whether this could be maybe a side hustle that I could have in the background. So we started putting together some ideas for a small business, and we had a friend who was a web designer, and we got in touch with him to see if he could create a website for us and create some branding. And I started thinking about how I would turn my alphabet into a kit, and that's really how Featherstitch House began. So put together my felt alphabet kit and thought I can't just sell one product surely, so I also created a little kiwi fruit keyring and a learn embroidery clock kit as well. So they were our launch products, and gradually we started putting together a set of kits to launch a business, and so that's how Featherstitch House came about really. Then I went back to school and carried on through the year just with Featherstitch House ticking around in the background. I started posting on Instagram and thought I would make a few tutorial videos just to show people how to get started with making the felt letters, and that's how I started on YouTube really. So I made a few initial videos, then didn't make any for ages, and I was finding when I went back to school after lockdown that it was so uncertain, and because of my health it was really risky for me. I actually approached my very supportive boss at the time and asked if it would be possible for me to take a sabbatical just until things with COVID had settled down, and he very graciously agreed. And so I took a year off, unpaid, to just wait and see what was happening with COVID and just give Featherstitch House a kick start. And that's when I started last year's Winging It project. So in January 2022 I started making regular videos, and this is where we're up to now. So yeah, that's the story of Featherstitch House. It's a little bit of my story as well, and I hope that's given you a little bit of an insight. Hopefully that helps you understand a little bit more why my videos have got shorter in the last few months. It's an attempt to keep making videos without reducing the quality, but also not make myself ill in the process. I really love this community. I love the channel. I love all the comments that you put in. I think it's just a lovely, supportive little community we've got here. And if you are new, you're so welcome. If you've been here from the beginning, thank you so much for continuing to support and watch. I would absolutely love for one day this to be my full-time gig. I think one of the reasons why we started Featherstitch House was knowing that I don't actually have that many years of teaching left in me. For those of you that don't know, I suffer with rheumatoid arthritis, which is an immune system condition which causes a lot of pain and enormous fatigue, and really, I think realistically my long-term future in teaching is limited because of the demands of the job and how it affects me physically. So part of Featherstitch House was about trying to future-proof myself and have something else to do beyond teaching. So we're not there yet, contrary to what you may think. Being a YouTuber for most people is not a full-time option. If you do want to offer some support, just some little tips: let adverts play. I try not to overload my videos with adverts, but if you let them play through, I get a little bit of revenue from that. You can also hit the super thanks button at the bottom. I find this all very embarrassing, so I never mention it, but it's a way that you can make a financial contribution to the future of this channel if you are able to. Whether you are able to or not, I will continue to make videos. I'm currently thinking about our project for next year. I've got some ideas, but obviously it probably will take a different format to the last couple of years because I have got to think about how I continue to make videos as well as being a full-time teacher as well, and so that's going to take some creative thinking. But do let me know in the comments if there's anything in particular you would like to see more of. So if you want more step-by-step tutorials and me showing you different processes, let me know that. If you want something different, let me know that as well. I'd love to hear. I've just put in all my stitching there. I'm just ironing my panel from the back and smoothing it out, and we're pretty much done. So I'm going to trim off any little stray threads and then we're done. I did cut out a few little leaves. I was going to put some leaves on, but then I put them on and didn't like it. I thought it just looked too crowded, but I just wanted to show you that that is an option. If you like it, you could cut out some little bits of green and put them in as leaves, but I quite like how spacious this looks. I really like this one. I love the stitching. I love I love the colours because I keep using them. I'm just really pleased with the way this one turned out, so I can't wait to see your versions. Please do share them at hashtag FSH23quilt. If you have enjoyed this, please do give us a thumbs up. Really appreciate it. It helps other people find our videos as well. I will link some similar projects over here if you want to keep going with your applique and stitch journey, and if you are liking our content, just click on the logo down here. It makes it really easy for you to subscribe. Thanks so much for joining me this week for an unusual video but a little bit of a getting to know you session, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.